things that are arising in terms of the movement of people and economic disparities, relentless migrations, pushing people into shanty cities where essentially young men, all that they do because they have no gainful employment is posture on the street corner, join gangs and kill people. There are some nations and citizens of nations on the planet right now that just they cannot afford to be alive. The nation is destitute and bankrupt. The concept of sovereignty is weird in that context. And then moving into the area that we focus on. I mean, this is a euphemism for terrorism, extreme actors with extreme weapons. Transnational organized crime, which is what we will mainly be focusing on. But I put that at the end of the list, not because it's the least important, but because we need to bear in mind, and certainly, again, I'm looking at the team also from UNODC, we need to be thinking about the link between what we are doing on a daily basis and all of these things. You turn on the tap in the washroom that's somewhere outside. You can drink that water because Australia has managed to govern its people and its resources in such a way that it produces, in general, benign outcomes in terms of the administration of justice and the delivery of resources. You try doing that in Malawi and other places where I've worked, you're not going to get that result. A small example, but one that's telling in terms of the fact that things can be organized in such a way as to produce those outcomes. But there are a number of threats in the meanwhile. So governance, what are the things that that are the levers that we can use to make these things happen? I've listed, and I'll read again because as we can see it's difficult to read from the back. First of all, to understand. What is the problem? Do we understand the problem? Do we know its dimensions? Are we aware of what is happening? Leadership, something that is very, very sorely called for right now at this time. Is there sufficient civil society consensus to underpin the directions in which leadership is pointing us? Does that civil society consensus crystallize into laws and norms of behavior, conventions of behavior? What about our institutions? I don't know what is the specific name of the entity, the water authority or whatever that runs the water show here in Canberra. But does that institution have the capacity? Is it? Are people trained in hydraulics? Do they have a reasonably a sensible degree of career promotion prospects? Are they properly equipped? Or, as happens in other countries, is the money that is allocated by the government budget for the water authority of whatever city in whichever country being siphoned off, pardon the pun, into someone's pocket, which means that the ministry and the department doing the work has a group of people sitting down listlessly, drawing a small salary for 2 hours of work that they've turned up to, and then they go out in the afternoon and drive taxis to try to make enough money to feed their families. The result of which is complete dysfunction, and when you turn the water on, it either comes out brown or it doesn't come out at all. Hence the corruption dimension. And resources and money, what is happening in countries surrounding. These things, I think, are levers. And I use them there because, described in a different way, those are the things that most of the technical cooperation work that the United Nations, UNODC at least, does to link up the is, which is what is now, with the ought, which is what we should be aiming for. The colors got changed somehow in the projection. And so what? Human security. Human security is achieved when these things, I think, are visible to the citizens. Choices. A young girl in Badakhshan province in Afghanistan has very little control over her schooling, her ability to reproduce when she wants and with whom she wants. countless studies have shown that if you want to do one thing and one thing only to improve development in your country, invest in primary school education for girls. Choices, as an example. Rule of law, security. Now, I've talked about human security here. This is what in politics or political science is called an essentially contested concept. And a lot of people poo-poo it. And a lot of people think that it is fuzzy, you know. In fact, Gareth Evans done a great book recently on responsibility to protect. He says that he likes the idea of human security and is dismissive of those who dismiss it by saying that it's an idea that's great in practice, doesn't work out in theory. I think that as we move towards addressing these problems, the traditional concept of security, these Kissingerian concept of security, you know, bullets, divisions, tanks, and so forth, is going to become less and less relevant. And what will become more and more relevant for human security is getting it right in this area, because that's the outcome of getting it right. Effective provision of goods and services, including access to justice. But there is another alternative, and that is the less salubrious alternative, and we will talk about that for the rest of the discussion. That is supposed to come out red, and that's supposed to be green, in case you guys are wondering why I've chosen specific colors. It really... there it is. So we can all look at this one now, I think. No. So poor governance. The state has a reduced capacity to manage social tension and conflict. The institutions are not trusted. Think of the Water Authority. Think of the Immigration and Customs Department, where you go with your passport and your form, want to renew it, and you get rejected 3 or 4 times. I used this analogy in a speech yesterday, and I think 4 people in this room were there, so I'm sorry to use the same example, but for me I think it gets the point across. And you eventually realize that what is the issue is that not that your forms are wrong, but that people want to bribe. Because they also need to take care of their family. It's a corruption of need in that case, usually, if it's someone behind a till, rather than corruption of greed, where massive billions of dollars are siphoned off from mining concessions and so forth. Institutions not trusted. Organized crime and transnational organized crime forms a symbiosis with politics. That's where the real trouble starts, because your entire political process becomes corrupted, and then that spreads to the newspaper editorials, the decisions in the Supreme Court, and so forth. People flee the country. Brain drain, vicious circle. Poor services, failed cities. State becomes a predator. State becomes a predator on its citizens. The whole concept of sovereignty was to establish, you know, the whole, at least in Western political philosophy, you know, Hobbes and Locke and social contract. The state's supposed to mean something. There's a reason why you salute the flag and the national anthem and so on, because you give a certain degree of loyalty. You go and serve in the army, but the state is to protect you from the outside forces, as well as to have exclusive legal right to use force, and sometimes deadly force, in the protection of its citizens. But if it becomes a predator on its citizens, what then?